Going to have a quick look at capital punishment. Now, I'm using my mobile phone for this one, so it could be all over the place. The question is it morally acceptable for the state to execute people? And if so, under what circumstances? It's a question that's been debated for centuries, and I guess there are two key ethical issues to tease out from this. One is the concept of punishment, and the other is whether it's morally right to ever take a life. Now, there are six main types of punishment. One is deterrence to put people off. The other is protection, to protect society and criminals from themselves. There's reformation, to reform the criminal. Retribution, to pay for wrongdoings. Reparation, compensate the victims. And vindication, to make sure the law is respected. Capital punishment, I guess, could come into deterrence, protection, and compensation. Capital punishment can only be mandated by the state. So if any other organisation claims to have executed a person, they haven't. They've actually committed murder. I guess one of the key things here for us to look at is, what does Christianity say about capital punishment? Because on the one hand, we have turn the other cheek and love thy neighbour, but we also know that in a time when the world was more overtly Christian, Christendom, if you will, capital punishment was really common. So how is that possible? How does that exist? On the whole, Christians consider that we are all sinful. It's part of human nature. We all have the potential to commit a crime. But outside of Christianity, sin and crime are two very distinct things. For example, in the Ten Commandments, it says, thou shalt not commit adultery, but that's technically not a crime. In the Hebrew Scriptures, God is seen as a judge. He gives the Ten Commandments and sets of rules for the chosen people to follow. He's a God of justice. We also have, eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And then Jesus comes along, who taught forgiveness and love, even forgiving the criminal who was crucified alongside him. He said, love thy neighbour and pray for those who persecute you, turning the whole thing on its head. And like I said before, it is really strange. Sorry, there's people walking past everywhere. It is really strange to consider this idea of Christendom, of a Christian world where people would preach love thy neighbour and turn the other cheek. But punishments for crimes could be death. How do you get those two things to match up? I guess we could go back to St. Augustine. St. Augustine was justifying how Christian soldiers could kill without violating the commandment, thou shalt not kill. And he used Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 13, verse 4, and that said, for the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. So according to St. Paul, the government is in place purely because of God. God wills it, if you will. You have a hierarchy. You have God, the government, the people. If the people do wrong, they answer to the government, who answer to God. So, if the government decrees that a person deserves death as a punishment, then in this day and age that we're talking about, that was considered to be mandated by God, blessed by God. It may also have been the case that God is seen by Christians to be the ultimate judge. So, sentencing a criminal to death, to meet their maker, as it were, would have been the ultimate punishment. May God have mercy on your soul. Of course, most Christians would oppose the death penalty in the modern age, and most countries, in fact, are still opposing the death penalty. But as we've seen in class, over 60% of the population of the globe live in a country where the death penalty is still legalized. It is still a valid punishment. So, why would Christians say that the death penalty is wrong? They would believe more in forgiveness, and that it is wrong to take a life, especially it is wrong to take eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Love thy enemy and pray for those who persecute you. And of course, blessed are the peacemakers. Forgot about that one.